As it's been for several years now, look to the indies if you're looking for a classic survival horror fix. Heartworm continues the trend of quality indie releases in the space. It doesn't do anything groundbreaking beyond the tried and true formula, but it is a love letter full of heart to the survival horror of old. It has some of the best camera usage outside of the classic Resident Evil and Silent Hill titles. It is a bit on the easy side from its combat, resource management to the puzzles, but Heartworm's plot helps make up for some of these shortcomings. The story of a young woman dealing with grief and loss of a family member. Heartworm's story is personal, sincere, and full of heart. If you're a fan of what I cover on the channel and looking for a new survival horror experience that evokes the works of old, Heartworm's got you covered. Before beginning, I will keep spoilers to a minimum, but there might be a tiny bit here and there. Thanks to the fellow Boulder Punchers through Patreon, YouTube memberships, one-time donations for the extra support of the channel. Check the pinned comment or description if you're interested in supporting the channel further. If you haven't done so already, do consider subscribing to the channel. And finally, a disclosure that I did receive an early review key for Heartworm. Big ups to Evolve PR for hooking me up with one. So let's dive in. In Heartworm, we play as Sam, a young woman struggling to move on from the death of her beloved grandfather. She ends up down a internet forum rabbit hole, where else, hearing of a house that can let people cross to the other side.
You're not gonna believe me, and I don't even know if I really believe it myself, but I guess a part of me must, because I'm going. It's far, on an abandoned road, a few miles from that power plant in the mountains. It was hard to find anything about it. I started on message boards, and I ended up in a chat room talking with people who know people who know people who've gone. They said a lot of crazy stuff, but the one thing that they all agreed on is that in that house, there's a room that can take you to the other side, to see the people that you've lost again. The thing is, no one who's gone has ever come back, and that's why I'm writing you. Not for advice, not to get you to talk me out of going. Actually, by the time you read this, I'll already be there. I just wanted to let you know, in case I don't come back. That way you won't be wondering where I've gone. Either way, you don't have to worry about me anymore.
With a film camera in tow, Sam heads to this house to investigate if there's any truth to this claim. What she finds will lead her down a path that she wasn't expecting with how Heartworm unfolds. On the game's timeline, I couldn't find a concrete date for when Heartworm takes place. Looking at her desktop computer and the boombox in her room, it's around the turn of the 21st century, late 90s, early 2000s. Heartworm isn't what I call a period piece, playing up to the nostalgia of that time frame. Feels like it's there to have a time frame where cell phones weren't everywhere. As a character, Sam does remind me of Heather Mason from Silent Hill 3 in ways, although older by a few years. The flavor text as we explore Heartworm can have some of that sass you'd hear from Heather, and like Heather, Sam is trying to quit smoking. We begin the game with a lighter and cigarettes in our inventory. Throughout Heartworm, Sam will have monologues giving thoughts about the current situation or her past. And no, don't worry, she's not like a modern protagonist who never shuts up. These monologues are spread out over the course of Heartworm. They don't take away from the experience.
My grandfather used to take me hiking here as a kid. I kept coming on my own after he passed. It was a grounding experience, something to get me out of my own head. My memories here are good, for the most part, but I stopped hiking here after some bad ones.
On all fronts, Heartworm is old school survival horror. There's even the warning that some parts of this game may be considered violent or cruel. You have your tank controls, although you have the option for modern movement should you wish. You have a very cozy save room with an item box. Yes, Heartworm makes use of a limited inventory. I did perk up while playing the demo for Heartworm a while back when I realized it would use a limited inventory. I can understand when survival horror titles forgo limited inventories. It's a tricky balance to challenge the player but not to frustrate them, but if done right, it adds so much to the experience. The gold standard being the Resident Evil remake. All the trade-offs you have to make between Jill and Chris with the different number of item slots, all the decisions you have to make of dealing with enemies, especially Crimson Heads, deciding on how much space to leave open for your next venture out, You get into a bit of a flow state, always thinking about your next move, what resources you have on hand. If balanced right, it adds so much to the survival horror experience. So I was very curious to see how Heartworm would handle its limited inventory. End result? Well, it's a bit of a missed opportunity. It was rare for me at any point to run out of inventory space. While items like keys or objects do take up space in your inventory, the game doesn't throw many of them at you at once. When it comes to Sam's film camera, our weapon, it can hold a generous amount of film within the camera itself. On the combat side of things, Heartworm isn't too challenging. There's not much pressure to keep many healing items on hand. But the main issue comes from the number of item slots. Sam starts with 6 item slots. But very early on the game's runtime, with a bit of exploration, you'll find an expansion giving you 8 item slots. There was a tiny bit of item juggling happening in the early game, but once I had the 8 slots, I didn't recall any further item juggling. It's one of those elements where I have to wonder how different of an experience Heartworm would be if there were no item expansion option, or I missed in my playthrough, if I only had 6 slots available throughout the game. As a result, beyond an early game stretch, I never got into that flow of item juggling, where I'm thinking of how many item slots to keep free on my next venture out. An element of gameplay that could add so much to the survival horror experience. Now, to be fair, Heartworm has a shifting layout in its travels. Some stretches are more open with less focus on interconnection, like the earlier town section. Another stretch in the forest, while having more of an interconnected feel, is still quite spread out. It's a stretch and area reminiscent of the Spencer Mansion from Resident Evil, where Heartworm puts far more emphasis on the interconnected element, of unlocking shortcuts as the area loops back on itself. There's even a section of this location that gave me a chuckle with a nice little tribute to the Spencer Mansion. For this interconnected stretch, Heartworm could have bumped up on the item juggling, but never quite gets there, especially with 8 slots in tow. So if you do end up playing Heartworm, which I very much recommend you doing so, consider foregoing the item expansion. If the game gave it as a later option in the areas of greater interconnectedness as a reward for thorough exploration, that would have been far better, so it's very much at the end of the day a missed opportunity. And again, to be fair, it's a very tough juggling act to get right. Get the balance wrong and you end up something with a frustrating affair like Silent Hill 4 and to a certain extent, Signalis. But again, as I mentioned, it can add so much to the survival horror experience. It's one of the reasons I found Amnesia the Bunker to be one of the best recent experiences in the world of survival horror. How it handled its limited inventory and resource management was some of the best I've seen outside of Resident Evil. For Heartworm, the issue is that it's not much of a consideration for a great length of the game's runtime. So while the resource management of Heartworm is a bit of a letdown, what isn't is the camera. And I'm not talking about Sam's camera. I'm talking about how Heartworm makes use of camera angles. It's by far Heartworm's greatest strength. It's some of the better camera work I've come across outside the classic Resident Evil and Silent Hill titles. Heartworm has a mixture of fixed camera angles along with the camera following Sam. There's a great mixture of the two with how the game can flow from fixed to dynamic. And Heartworm loves to do zoomed out shots, like something you find at points in a point and click adventure to convey the size and scope of the environment. It does a fantastic job of evoking that sense of wonder. It has you curious about what you'll come across next. Many times I found myself slowing down to take in the world around me, especially during the stretch in the forest. There's something about the swaying of the trees with the game's low poly look. As well, there's surreal dreamlike landscapes spread throughout, that where Sam has gone is familiar to her, but something is also quite off about them. Heartworm does give you the option to turn the pixelated look on or off. I kept it on to be more in line with the PS1 feel that the game sets out for and nails. Another thing that Heartworm nails is the music. It's a fantastic soundtrack that's quite piano heavy, ranging from building unease and tension to a more relaxing feeling for quieter sections like the forest. And then there's some downright out there tracks that are disorienting beyond belief, especially one in a late game stretch. It's a perfect fit for what the game is going for, but I'll leave that for you to discover yourself. Bringing up cameras again, this time I'm talking about Sam's camera, the one we use in combat against our foes. When I first heard about Heartworm and its use of a camera for combat, the first series that popped to mind was Fatal Frame. I mean, what else would it be? How many cues was Heartworm going to take from it? Well, it's for the most part only the camera itself. There's not a upgrade system, no first person aiming, although you can find a camera mod for a rapid burst of shots. It's more in line with classic survival horror of point and shoot. But Heartworm does give you the option of shooting over the shoulder or from the fixed camera perspective. With how the game handles its camera angles, I found using over the shoulder to be the better choice. The reason being with some of its zoomed out shots. If you want to get a better look around your environment, you can do so with the over-the-shoulder option. There was one point where the game tucked away a healing item behind a fence that there's no way you would have found if you didn't have the over-the-shoulder option. But the main reason is to alleviate some frustrations in combat scenarios. There may be points where you're fighting an enemy and then you move back and you're now in a zoomed out camera shot. It can be a bit tough to get a good view of the enemy. I do love the enemies we come across here in Heartworm. These static enemies, who make up the bulk of Heartworm's enemies, have some great sound design. There are some statues that we come across that reminded me of the game Elisa from a few years back. They wouldn't feel out of place there and make for a fun enemy type to fight in Heartworm. As I brought up earlier, Heartworm is pretty easy. Most stretches offer plenty of room to navigate past enemies of all shapes and sizes. They like to throw projectile attacks your way, but as long as you keep moving, you'll be alright. As long as you explore, there's plenty of film to come across to restock your camera for ammo. Outside of combat, the camera receives further usage. You can use it at no ammo cost to light up an area for a brief period of time. Amusing to note that the last video I covered before Heartworm, the 2009 licensed game Saw, allowed the player to do the same. This is another one of those elements within Heartworm that feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. It's great early on while venturing through an abandoned house with little light. It does wonders in adding to the atmosphere, wondering what could be around the next corner. But there are long stretches where you won't need it to light up the environment, like the woods. There's a couple sections where Sam will find herself in rooms full of mannequins. Which ones are enemies? Which ones aren't? These areas were begging to have the game to be near pitch black, requiring a flash of the camera to see. The mannequins would shift around in the darkness, like something out of Condemned Criminal Origins. So while I do like the addition of the camera to light up dark areas, it's something that Heartworm could have made a little more mileage out of. Another thing Heartworm could have made more use of is puzzles. On the notes of the puzzles themselves, they do weigh on the easy side, but at least Heartworm does avoid some of the common pitfalls when it comes to puzzles in survival horror games. One I refer to as the regurgitator puzzle, where you find information from a node or something in the environment and enter it one-to-one elsewhere to progress, where all you need to do is write it down or remember it in your mind and replicate it elsewhere. Not to say that Heartworm doesn't do this, but it's not the only step to the puzzle. For example, there's one section where you have to make note of the orders of symbols in the location. You have to then sort these symbols in the right order with a tile sorting puzzle. The plot of Heartworm makes use of tried and true staples of survival horror like notes, to help piece together Sam's story and others who have been here before us. One highlight found in the early game is the story of a man dealing with his dying wife and the aftermath of her death. With but a few notes and some environmental storytelling, Heartworm conveys a tragic tale of grief and loss that hits hard. As I mentioned earlier, Sam will have a few monologues spread throughout the game. Some give her thoughts on the current situation, others on her past.
What just happened? All those stairs, and what was that thing chasing me? Now I'm somewhere. If this is the afterlife, it's not what I was expecting. Regardless of my expectations, I can't go back the way I came. Good. I'm not leaving until I get answers.
Heartworm also makes use of a few cutscenes beyond the game's intro. Most use in-game graphics, but have plenty of movement and camera cuts. It's an interesting contrast to how the game itself plays, zoomed right into the action of the scene. There's also CGI cutscenes that evoke that feeling and style of computer animated shows you'd see in the late 90s and early 2000s. Nice little throwback there. There is a somber, melancholy feeling throughout Heartworm. After all, Sam is dealing with heavy loss and grief over the death of her beloved grandfather. She's taken this journey to find a way to the other side to be with him again. Death and the meaning of life weighs heavy on the mind of Sam. She's a bit of a loss of her place in the world.
I wonder if these artists felt that way too. like their efforts were in vain, but they kept at it anyway. I'm glad that they persisted. That's what's important, at least to me. And these pieces are lasting reminders of that effort.
It's not like she's an angsty teen, she's a bit older than that, beyond that stage. Or it's not like she just has a woe is me attitude. She pushes forward, but also reflects back on her life thus far. There's a sadness about her, but she finds hope in her travels. It's a personal, earnest, heartfelt, and sincere story. When it seems like any modern games, or any modern media for that matter, can't go 2 seconds without being ironic, it's a nice change of pace. Not to say that the game isn't devoid of humor, but it's kept in check for the right moments, beyond some of Sam's sassier flavor text. There's elements and themes of its story that's age-old that everyone can relate to in some shape or form. A story of loss and grief in the aftermath, but also the reflecting and finding the hope and strength to move on. So while it doesn't break the mold, Heartworm is another great addition to the indie survival horror library over the past few years. A love letter to that PS1 time frame of the genre, some of the best camera work I've seen outside of the classic Resident Evil and Silent Hill games. It is a bit on the easy side, with the resource management that does little to challenge you, to the easy puzzles, but it's a well-paced experience with a story that's sincere and full of heart. I won't be surprised to see some further updates to the game after its release. I'm hoping for an update to give greater challenges on the gameplay front, but even as is, it's well worth putting aside some time to experiencing Heartworm. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and your thoughts in the comments below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. There's also a channel Discord if you're interested, see the pinned comment or description. Special shout out to the Boulder Punchers who give extra support to the channel on Patreon or YouTube memberships. For those in the complete global saturation tier, American Boot, Flan Nagel. For those in the thank you for your patronage tier, Tom Terrible. For those in the now this is Boulder punching tier, Ethan, the Madman in Waco, the original Narcy's Diet Thick Dew TM Neo Edition. For those in the Jill Sandwich tier, On Hell, Benji, Benny Winterdawn, BBF in Bloxburg, Darkrod 99, Extraordinary 2, Happy Tunes, Logan Lepin, Mad Morpheus Gaming, Michael Walters, Nico Pero, Sam Jones, Squid Vicious, Will Han, and Zin. If you want to receive early access to videos, be featured in the credits, receive periodic updates and more, do consider joining as a patron. Or if not monthly, supporting the channel with a one-time donation through Ko-fi and a super thanks. Again, check the pinned comment and description if you're interested. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video. Boulder Punch out.